We're learning about Tu B'Av tonight. This Shabbat is the 15th day of the month of Av, and it's one of the least known holidays in the Jewish year that many people know very, very little about it, and most people don't celebrate it in any way. In the last decade or two, it's had like a comeback. People are starting to find ways to celebrate it. So we're going to learn tonight 6 different reasons and then a 7th reason why we have this day. Now, the most important thing that it is very known, and that's why it's so surprising that it kind of like dropped from people's consciousness, but it says in the Mishnah, in Masechet Ta'anit, if anyone wants to look it up, it's in the 4th chapter, the 8th Mishnah. It says, there were no days as joyous in the Jewish year as Yom Kippur and Tu B'Av. Now that already is like, well, what about Pesach? What about Sukkot? What about Simchas Torah? What about Purim? What about Hanukkah? But the Mishnah says that there were no days as joyous as Yom Kippur and Tu B'Av. And then the Mishnah describes what happened on Tu B'Av and Yom Kippur, that the young maidens would go out to the vineyards and dance, and they would all wear white garments that everyone borrowed. No one wore their own white garment, so no one would be looking like at the outside, because everyone knew that everyone's not wearing their own garments. And they would go out and dance in the vineyards, and the young men would come, and it was considered a time that people fell in love, that people made shidduchim, people made matches. Now, what many people don't realize is that idea has become attached to Tu B'Av, but they did it on Yom Kippur as well. And the way we do Yom Kippur today is like we're in shul the whole day long. We're in synagogue and we're fasting and we're praying the whole day long. But in the ancient times, this was before there was a synagogue structure. The whole service was done in the temple for everyone. And so on both of these days, young people would get together and not like, have fun, but it was a time that people would make matches, that people would start the process of coming together. So in the Talmud, 6 different reasons are given why these 2 days were so joyous. I just want to mention, again, it's surprising to hear that Yom Kippur is a happy day. But the answer is because it's a day when God cleanses us. God atones for us, that we do tshuva, that we're purified, that we're ending the 10 days of tshuva and we're starting again. And it was considered, what could be more joyous than that? And that's why there are certain synagogues, especially Hasidic shuls, where the singing on Yom Kippur is amazing. It's amazing. It's a different type of singing. It's not like Simchas Torah, everyone's jumping around and singing. It's a deep type of what's called nusach. It's just beautiful nigunim that are special for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And Tu B'Av is considered so joyous because we know in our experience, probably the most joyous thing in the world is a wedding. A Jewish wedding is just so joyous. And Tu B'Av is when couples would start getting together. So let's go over quickly because there's so much to learn about Tu B'Av. But let's go over the 6 reasons that the Gemara gives for Tu B'Av. So the first one is that the first generation, and I'm not going to elaborate, each one of these we could actually elaborate on much more, but in order to get through a lot of the material, the first generation that went into Israel after the 40 years in the desert, there was a decree that people could only marry people from their same tribe. And this lasted for 1 generation until the land was settled. Everyone had its inheritance. Everything was clear. And then on Tu B'Av, this decree was canceled. And therefore, people from different tribes could now marry together. So that's broad. Now, that's obviously connected to this idea of the young women going out to the vineyards and dancing on Tu B'Av. The second reason is very different but similar in that in the era of the judges, Shoftim, there was a civil war in Israel, a terrible civil war, all of the tribes against the tribe of Binyamin. We won't go into the whole story, but a very, very horrible and tragic incident occurred within the tribe of Binyamin, and the rest of the tribes were outraged, and it actually began a real civil war. And at one point, the 11 tribes made a vow they would not let their daughters or sons marry anyone from Binyamin. But again, after the civil war ended and everyone got back together, on Tu B'Av, again, they canceled this decree. And therefore, all the tribes could intermarry with Binyamin. So it's very similar to the first reason. And again, we have this idea of where did the custom come from that they would go out to the vineyards and dance and make shidduchim. Another reason that is given is that how was the decree that everyone, all the men between 20 and 60 in the desert would die in the desert during the 40 years? So the Midrash tells us that every year, it's a bit of a way out Midrash, every year people would dig a grave and lay down in the grave. And on Tisha B'Av, approximately 15,000 people would not get up. And this happened for all 40 years. Now, how we understand this is a different discussion, exactly how that worked. But on the last year, it was the 40th year already. So, and it wasn't clear what time it started. The last year, those that were left that had not died lay down in their grave on Tisha B'Av, and they all woke up the next morning. And every night for a whole week, they lay down in their graves. But when it came to Tu B'Av, they realized that the decree had ended. So here's the third example of a decree being nullified or canceled on Tu B'Av, and those people came into the land. The fourth reason given is another decree was lifted, and that is that when the 2 kingdoms, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, split, and it was split for around 200 years until the Assyrians took away the 10 tribes in captivity. But during almost all of that time, the kings of the northern kingdom forbid anyone from going to Jerusalem because it was like a threat to their kingdom. If people would go to Jerusalem, then how would you maintain a northern kingdom? So again, on Tu B'Av, this decree was canceled. It was canceled. The fifth reason given in the Gemara, this is all in Masechet Ta'anit, is that the last stronghold of the Bar Kokhba rebellion in approximately 120 CE, this is 50 years after the temple was destroyed, there was another revolt against the Romans led by Bar Kokhba and Rabbi Akiva. At a certain point, though, it failed. And the last stronghold was in Beitar. And when the Romans took Beitar, they basically slaughtered the entire city. And the bodies, they didn't allow them to be buried. But then on Tu B'Av, the Romans, again, canceled the decree and allowed Jews to bury the bodies from Beitar. And it wasn't a joyous thing, but it was a tremendous relief to people. Now we can understand that today because right now there are two bodies of two soldiers from Israel that were captured and then killed in the war in 2014. And the parents have led an unceasing campaign to get the bodies of their sons back so they can give them a proper burial. So that's, this is in the news all of the time. This is over two bodies. This was an entire city the bodies were not allowed to be buried. So when they were finally allowed to bury them, in a strange way, we'll call it a relief. It's hard to say it was a joyous event, but it was a tremendous relief that they could properly bury these bodies. And the last reason brought in the Gemara is that the altar in Jerusalem had constant need for wood. And it was considered a great, great privilege to bring wood to the temple that would be used on the altar. Just like today, it's a great honor to give money to a certain cause or to help build a synagogue or a mikvah or a yeshiva, whatever it is. So the last day every year that people could bring wood was on Tu B'Av. And the reason is given is it's considered that Tu B'Av is like the height of the power of the sun. And for wood to be dried properly, it needs a lot of sun, not a lot of heat. And so up to Tu B'Av, people would bring the wood offerings, and then they would stop until the next cycle for the next year. So those are 6 reasons of what happened on Tu B'Av. And some of them are obvious that it was a reason for joy, but not all of them seem to be that. But what they all have in common, except maybe the last one, is decrees being canceled. So this is obviously connected to Yom Kippur, because during Musaf of Yom Kippur, during the prayer called Unatana Tokef, one of the deepest parts of prayer of the entire year is this. It's relatively short, but it's extremely powerful. And if people, I'm just trying to think of the name, but Leonard Cohen made a beautiful song based on this prayer. Who by fire and who by water. He then made a poetic rendition of it, but there's absolutely no doubt where he got the inspiration for this song. It's a very, very well-known song. And at the high point of Unatana Tokaf, everyone yells out, Utashuva, Utafila, Utsadaka, Ma'avirin et Roa Hagezera. That doing tshuva, repenting, praying, and giving charity has the power to annul, to cancel an evil decree. So here we see a very deep connection between Tu B'Av, where almost every reason given in the Gemara for what happened on Tu B'Av has to do with canceling decrees. And that's the power of Yom Kippur, of tshuva and tefillah and tzedakah, has the power to annul evil decrees. Now there's a seventh reason that I'm proposing, that it's not written in the Gemara, but who by fire. Thank you, Nachum. Nachum. The name of the song, anyone wants to look it up, is called Who by Fire. And again, he changes the words, but he caught most of the ruach of this song. So the seventh reason, in a sense, in my mind, is the most important reason of all of them. We all know that we just came out of Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is, in a sense, it's called the lowest point of the year. I've heard Rav Ginsburg use that expression. It's like the lowest point. We literally sit on the ground and fast. And after 3 weeks of contemplating Jewish history, it's like the low point of the year. But we know that the afternoon of Tisha B'Av, we already have a different ruach, and that's where this idea that the Mashiach is born on Tisha B'Av. We end Tisha B'Av really on a higher note, especially the Torah reading and the Haftorah of the afternoon of Tisha B'Av is actually full of hope for the future. That's actually where we have the concept that the third temple will be, God says, it's the house of my prayer for all the nations. And that comes from the afternoon of Tisha B'Av. We actually read it on every fast day. So here, Tu B'Av is less than a week later. And so the idea throughout Jewish history is, where do you go when you reach the bottom? The only place to go is up. Where do you go from the depths of exile? Where do you go from the depths of the Holocaust? You come back to Israel. You move to redemption. So in my mind, all these things happened on Tu B'Av, but if you look at each one individually, one would be hard-pressed to say this is a reason it's called one of the 2 happiest days of the year. But when we understand that, I believe that the sages wanted to help us move from the lowest point and move us to the highest point. And so therefore, they looked to see, and they started seeing a pattern here, And when they put it all together, we end up with the idea of Tu B'Av. So now let's look at a few deeper understandings about Tu B'Av. And like I said, we're not going to be able to get through all of them, but those who get our weekly Torah Digest, there'll be a whole Tu B'Av edition. And next week, we're going to continue by understanding the deep connection between the month of Av and Tishrei. And of course, Elul in between. So let me start this way. There's a very, very deep and profound understanding of Tu B'Av in the relationship of the whole calendar. And that is that every year we have a mitzvah called Orla, that we do not eat fruit from a tree in its first 3 years. The 4th year, we're allowed to redeem the fruit. And the 5th year, you can eat the fruit. So the question is, where do you start counting the year? So you start counting for Orla. Orla means the fruits that you can't eat for the first 3 years. It's from Rosh Hashanah. So there's a law that if you plant a tree it's actually the day after Tu B'Av, by the 16th of Av, by the time you get to Rosh Hashanah, you can count a whole year. And it's 45 days. But it's as if the trees had enough time to root itself, that you can, when you get to Rosh Hashanah, you can count it's been in the ground for a year. So it's this number 45 that is significant here, because from Tu B'Av to Rosh Hashanah is 45 days. Now, there is a discussion in Masechet Rosh Hashanah among the sages, a very, very deep, complicated, and profound discussion as to actually when was the world created. Was it created in the month of Nisan, or was it created in the month of Tishrei? Most people who don't know about this discussion in the Gemara assume, and rightfully so, as we'll see in one aspect, that the world is created on Rosh Hashanah, because that's the beginning of the new year. And even in the prayers of Rosh Hashanah, we mentioned that this is the first day of creation. And we have a tradition that the creation began on the 25th of Elul. Rosh Hashanah is actually the 6th day of creation. So it's the new year because Rosh Hashanah is the new year of years. So the month of Tishrei is the 7th month. So you say, wait a minute, if it's the new year, why isn't Tishrei the first month? So we actually have 4 new years, but the 2 that we're talking about is that Rosh Chodesh Nisan is the new year of months. Nisan is the new year of months. We count the months from Nisan. And Rosh Hashanah is the new year of years. So there's a whole discussion, when exactly was the world created? And in the Talmud, a solution is not arrived at. There's this whole discussion, and it's kind of left. Later, the Rabbeinu Tam explains there's no real disagreement here. The world is created in thought on Rosh Hashanah, as it were in God's mind on Rosh Hashanah, and in actuality, in Nisan. That's how Rabbeinu Tam solves this disagreement, which is not a definitive conclusion, is not reached in the Gemara, because there's aspects that they're both true. Now this, to get into this is very deep and complicated, but I'm mentioning it because there's something very significant here, is that Tu B'Av is 45 days before Rosh Hashanah. And it's brought down that the word thought, machshava, if you permute the letters, it's choshev ma, which means think. Ma means what, in Hebrew means what, but it also means mahut is essence. The essence of something is called its mahut. So there's a deep, deep understanding that the seed of the new year begins on Tu B'Av. Choshev ma. It's when the thought arose in God's mind to create the world. Now, what's significant here is that Tu B'Av, if you look at the calendar as a circle, so 180 degrees across from Tu B'Av is Tu B'Shvat, the 15th day of the month of Shvat. So we have a similar idea, is that Tu B'Shvat is 45 days before Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And again, you have this idea that the beginning of creation, because we have two aspects of creation. We have in actuality and, as it were, in thought. And they're both legitimate and they're both very real. And so on Tu B'Shvat, the tradition is, what happens on Tu B'Shvat? The sap begins to run in the tree. That the majority of water has already fallen by Tu B'Shvat. And the trees, even though you can't see it on the outside, except for the almond tree, the sap inside the tree begins to ascend. And symbolically, this is, again, Choshev Ma. On Tu B'Shvat, the sap beginning to run is as if the thought arising in God's mind to create the world. So this is Tu B'Shvat and Tu B'Av. They're 180 degrees across from each other. And significantly, they both have to do with trees. Tu B'Shvat is the new year of trees. It's all about trees and fruit. And we just saw two different things about Tu B'Av that have to do with trees. One, it was the last day that you could bring the wood to the temple for the altar. And it's also the last day that you could plant a tree and still count a whole year until Rosh Hashanah. So we're going to continue with this thought next week, because I'll save it, but there's a deep connection between Av and Tishrei. But here we're already seeing it. And that's why the custom is that from Tu B'Av, you can already start greeting people with wishing them a Shana Tova, Ketiva v'Chatima Tova. People start greeting each other with have a new year, and may you be written and inscribed in the book of life. And the tradition is, you don't have to, but it's a custom that you can already start from Tu B'Av, because it's understood there's something about Tu B'Av, which I explained one aspect, that is already the beginning or the seed of the new year. Now, we're going to take this a little bit deeper. So if from Tu B'Av to Rosh Hashanah is 45 days, but we have a tradition that Rosh Hashanah is the 6th day of creation. That means it really begins on the 25th day of Elul. And so from Tu B'Av to the 25th of Elul is 40 days. It's 40 days. So this is connected in an amazing way to the teaching that 40 days before the formation of the fetus, a voice goes out in heaven and says, this soul is meant for that soul. In other words, this idea of soulmates is coming 40 days before the formation of the fetus. So this idea that soulmates are being called out in heaven even before a person is born or is not even formed in the womb yet. So now we can understand on a very, very deep level the connection of Tu B'Av with the idea of people coming together and the young women going out to the vineyards and dancing and the men going following after. And again, the way it's given over in the Mishnah, it's so holy. It's not like they were going, to have a dance, to have fun. It was like, I won't say serious because it was very joyful, but it's very, very similar today in religious circles. People don't date the way it's talked about in the secular world. People start meeting each other when they're ready to get married. It doesn't mean that the first person you meet or the first person you're set up with is who you're going to marry. But the idea is, in religious circles, you don't start dating until you're serious about getting married. And that's the same thing. But when the girls would go to the vineyard, there was a kavana behind it. Like I said, it wasn't just to have go out on a Saturday night and have fun. So this idea, though, that 40 days before the beginning of creation, a voice comes out of heaven, and basically it's God saying, Israel is my soulmate. That's what we get from this. It's a very deep idea. The Midrash actually says that when the thought first arose in God's mind to create the world, it says, Yisrael Allah b'machshava techila, that the thought of Israel arose in God's mind before anything else. So this is like the bat call, this heavenly voice coming out, but in a sense, it's putting God and Israel together. So if you heard the words exactly, Yisrael Allah b'machshava, and remember we learned machshava is thought. Machshava is choshev ma, thinking of essence. So God is thinking about what's the essence of the world that I want to create. And that is the privilege and responsibility upon the shoulders of the Jewish people, because the thought of God arose first, but that thought was on the level of soulmates. So now we can understand this idea of, remember, two of the first reasons given where the tribes could now marry with each other, and the tribes could now marry again with Benjamin. So we see this theme running through the whole thing, but now let's connect it to Yom Kippur. Because what happened on the first Yom Kippur, that from the time that we left Egypt, the first Yom Kippur, this was before the laws were given. The laws of Yom Kippur had not been given yet, but Moshe came down from Har Sinai with the second luchot, with the second tablets of the law. And this was the sign of God's forgiveness for the golden calf. And that energy engraved itself in Yom Kippur to this day. In other words, the Moshe coming down with the luchot was as if God saying, I forgive you, you're atoned for, and we can start again. And in our mystical tradition, the highest level of relationship with God, actually on Yom Kippur, one of the most beautiful of the songs that we sing, goes through many descriptions of our relationship with God. God is our king and we are the subject. God is the shepherd and we are the sheep. God is the father and we are the children. But like the highest level is God is the beloved and we are the beloved. So again, this helps us answer the connection with Tu B'Av and Yom Kippur being the two most joyous days, because when Moshe came down with the tablets, you can imagine the joy. Is this like, this was after he broke the first tablets. There was 80 days of tshuva that came between the breaking of the luchot and Yom Kippur, were 80 days of tshuva. So here we see a very deep connection. And we mentioned the number 40, that there are 40 days between Tu B'Av and Yom Kippur. But there's also 40 days from Rosh Chodesh Elul to Yom Kippur. So this idea of 40 is repeated in a different cycle. It's like a cycle within a cycle within a cycle. And this is alluded to, and here I think we'll put it all together now, is we know that the Rashi Tevot, the acronym for Elul, is Ani L'Dodi V'Dodi Li. I am to my beloved, and my beloved is to me, from the Song of Songs, Shira Shirim. And because the first letters spell out Elul, Ani L'Dodi V'Dodi Li. But what's pointed out, I learned this from Rabbi Ginsburg, if you look at the last letter of each of these words, it's 4 yuds. Ani ends with a yud, L'Dodi ends with a yud, V'Dodi, another yud, Li. So 4 times 10, yud is 10, equals 40. So this alludes to this renewal of the love relationship from Rosh Chodesh Elul to Yom Kippur, but it's also from Tu B'Av to the beginning of creation. Both of them have the number 40. So there's actually more, and we will continue these ideas next week when we talk about the month of Av, because we saw that we're only not even halfway through the month, and its connection to Tisha, because as I said, in a few days, we're actually, in a sense, planting the seed for the new year. It's like it's already there. And so if we remember, we could already start greeting people, L'shana tova, ketiva, v'chatima tova, wishing people a good year. And for all those who are listening, who want to find their beshert, want to find their soulmate, Hashem should bless you very, very soon to find the right person at the right time. And we should all be blessed with a good year.